Dear brothers, sisters, friends, the whole biofam, I hope you're doing well. I hope this video finds you well. It's been a while since I've made a video, but I really wanted to give my thoughts on the coronavirus, since that's all anyone seems to be talking about these days. Now, first I'll say, this is not a prepping video. There's lots of people who talk about that out there, and frankly, the time to prepare is past. You should be getting stuff right now or yesterday, for your family and everything. And people they're going out in the markets, and they're at the supermarket. They're experiencing some shortages. Oh, there's no toilet paper. There's no hand sanitizer, and people are starting to panic, which is kind of expected, given what we knew already. But no, I wanted to make this video to talk about the metapolitics of this virus, and what are some of the lessons, and what, how can we as dissidents use this to, to reach people who were, they're just normal folks, and they're really scared about all of this stuff, and they see the disastrous way that it's being handled by our governments. So we're going to get into all of that. I want to recommend an article, to really put in perspective how we got here, because this virus, it didn't pop out of nowhere. As everyone knows, it started, I say started, but the reporting began in China, Wuhan, right? And so we've been watching it develop in China, with some, mixed faith in their numbers and so on. And so now it's come to Europe and North America, and it's spreading globally, and the World Health Organization has called this a global pandemic. Lots of places are shutting down travel. Lots of workplaces, corporations are closing their businesses, and schools closing. So this is obviously a serious happening. You can't really deny that. But I want to, if you haven't read this article on Medium, I'd like to point you towards this. This guy is talking about why you must act now. He's addressing this to global leaders, to businessmen and politicians and everyone like that. So, why I like this is he gives a lot of graphs and data and so on, talking about the virus, and here how, and the exponential rate of the virus in different countries. So he's gone through the data and studied a lot of this, and what he has found, this chart here, it seems, what are the takeaways? It's really that there are periods where you may have the virus, but you're asymptomatic. I think I've heard it can, as long as 2 weeks or so, can reside in you without you seeing any symptoms. So when you see the statistics, I think it's up to, this is March 14th now, up to 150,000 reported cases worldwide, and over 5,000 deaths. What that actually means, and he goes through it, is because of this lag of the true cases versus reported cases, it actually means that there are, we're somewhere here. We're somewhere here in this is, if this is China's development, we're somewhere here. Now, the difference between us and China is they had this, they actually locked down their whole country when they had only about 100 cases in their Hubei province. And then they started to lock it down. And they clamped down, and they saved a lot of lives. And now we're hearing people from China say the peak is over there. So, whether we can rely on those numbers, it depends who you ask. But I think maybe they're reliable. I don't have any reason to doubt them. I don't see what they would gain by lying about this. So, yeah, they went on lockdown, and they were able to suppress a lot of their deaths. But my point is we're in the early stages, and this is going to spread. And as he gets into later on here, the big problem is not just people dying of the virus, it's the healthcare system being overwhelmed. So here is sort of where we're at, and Europe, you can see France, it's exploding there. And the real danger is that this just spreads and spreads, and the real danger is that healthcare workers themselves get affected because they're being overworked and they're understaffed, and it's going to put a huge strain on the system. So that is where, he goes through country by country, all of the places where this has really exploded, and we have a lot of data. He says in the places where, South Korea or Italy or so on, where they waited to take action, and it just exploded and overwhelmed them. He says the death rate there was around 4%, whereas in some of these other Asian countries like Taiwan, Hong Kong, places that have experienced the SARS virus before, those places had a better grip on this, and they knew to take this seriously and lock everything down immediately so that it wouldn't spread. And those places, the death rate's only about 0.9%. You can see he gets into these numbers, and he's got a whole system for calculating that. But that is huge here. Countries that are overwhelmed will have a fatality rate between 3 to 5%. Others that are prepared see between 0.5 and 0.9%. And that's huge. So, yeah, Trump is out there saying, "Oh, we took action early. We did all this stuff." It's all BS. It's all BS. Okay, he's finally declared a national emergency. But what does that mean? It just means FEMA can spend money. It doesn't mean anything for you and me. It's not like we have to stay home. And so what are my predictions on what's going to happen in the United States and Europe? Well, it's going to get a lot worse. And every time it gets worse, our leaders are going to take a little more action. They're going to do a little bit more. But that is not the best response. The best response would be to do the most drastic action you can think of now, which, as he talks about further down here, he gets into some of the history. We've got case studies on the 1918 influenza pneumonia outbreak, and the cities that took action the earliest saw the least mortality rate. So he talks about social distancing, containment, and so, as far as I know, I think I've heard there's still planes coming in from Asia. This is just incredible. And why is this? Oh, well, we can't disrupt the economy. We can't disrupt the flow of people. So globalism is responsible in a way. Now, of course, you can point fault at the individual leaders themselves, like Trump or Trudeau, but this is a whole system. It's bigger than just them. it's very clear that the nations which have delayed are all of the globo homo ones, the ones where capitalism is what runs everything, and unfortunately, it's led to us being less safe because of this. Whereas, if you have some places with a dictator, or even communism or something, like in China, I mean, say what you will about communism, it's pretty terrible, right? But they were able to save lives by taking authoritarian action. So, okay. Right here, he talks about the cost of waiting. Even one day could be 20,000 cases in terms of when you take action. That's what we're dealing with when we're dealing with exponential curves. Yeah, so this is obviously important stuff. This is it's not just the flu, as they say. Now, why did the government fail us, and how did we get here? I mean, let's talk about what the media was saying a month ago, in February, January, and so on. They were basically blaming white people. They were saying, "Oh, you're just using this as an excuse to be racist to Asian people. Your concerns aren't legitimate." I have here this list on Wikipedia, of course. So Wikipedia, they're showing all of these different places where there were xenophobic incidents. And what they mean is just somebody said something that was, pretty common sense, and somebody else blew it out of proportion. You have, for instance, this is just one example that I pulled up here. An Asian woman in New York City apparently attacked and a hate crime. So she said, allegedly, "You've got the coronavirus, you Asian bleep," and punched this person. They don't mention the race, so it's not white, because if it was white, they would say, "Oh, this white person was racist against Asians." They just want you to believe that it's probably a white person. And then I saw somewhere else this Canadian journalist was, fired for just a tweet with his barber, who was wearing a mask, and he said, "I hope all I get is a haircut." So he just for making a joke, he gets fired. But this is par for the course, and so obviously the media is to blame here. They're definitely at fault. But I'm going to make the case here that it's more than just the media. I believe that our government wants us to die, and this virus affects mainly older people, and we know that older people, boomers, tend to be white, right? In America and Europe too, there's an aging white population, and so it's convenient for them. It helps them win elections if they see, if they can change the demographics. And I don't put them above, using some kind of bioweapon. So obviously that's speculation, and we can get into that further. But let's look at So, funny enough, David Pakman was
We are
someone who
continuing to deal with
had
this.
probably one of the best takes on this. I mean, I don't find myself agreeing with Mr. Pakman very often, but in this case, I gotta give it to him. He hit it on the nail, and of course, it's because of his partisanship. This is completely partisan. He wants to go after Trump, but how can you argue with his arguments? They are valid. So let's hear some of these here.
Situation. He cares about dealing with it as a political situation, making sure it doesn't endanger his reelection. And now Donald Trump, if he does change his approach this week, as the number of deaths increases in the United States, it's not going to be a change of approach because he's decided he now really cares about this as a public health issue. It's going to be a change of strategy because he's panicking about the stock market and the number of deaths and the political repercussions, and he is again concerned with getting himself reelected in November. It's the height of self-centered indifference to the plight of others, something Trump has a lifetime of experience with. Remember, disbanding the pandemic response team, Donald Trump did, cutting funding to the CDC, attacking people like Dr. Nancy Messonnier, who runs immunization and respiratory disease for the CDC, furious that she had the audacity to speak to media outlets and accurately describe the reality on the ground so that health workers would be prepared. And if you needed any more evidence that Donald Trump doesn't actually care about national disasters beyond their political effect, just think back to how he's dealt with other ones. Think back to when Donald Trump wrongly claimed a hurricane was barreling towards Alabama. They're simply telling lies. Another example.
He's going to go through all these other things that Trump supposedly did. Let's listen to a little more here.
China to the U.S. have been shut down. Every day you go to flightaware.com and you easily find planes coming to the United States from China, like this flight we're showing our audience from Shanghai to Los Angeles, whose flight map we have up on the screen right now. We are being lied to. It's not about the debt and deficit, which is bad enough, but it is less consequential in terms of life and death. This is not about, lies about did Trump really cut middle-class taxes or did he mess with withholdings tables. This is something that is life or death, and thousands have already died, and he simply cares about his reelection. That's the reality. Let me know what you think. All content related to.
All right. Yeah. So that's pretty hard to argue with there. Like, he could have taken so much more action, and every day though I see on Twitter, if you're following him, Donald Trump is, what is he talking about? The stock market up until basically 2 days ago or so, when oh, okay, this thing is serious, I guess I'll get up and address the nation. So he's done several addresses of the measures they're taking, but up until that point, it was kind of a joke. It's just like, don't worry, folks, the economy is gonna be fine. There's nothing to worry about. We're gonna make the big line go up. Make the big line go up. $1.5 trillion. The Federal Reserve is gonna just flood into our stock market, and the line barely does a little blip, and then it continues to go back down. And so this is seemingly all he cares about, right? I mean, now as Pacman points out, it does seem like he's taking more action. And do you really think that's because he's really invested in American and well-being, or is it just his desire to get reelected? I don't have a lot of faith left in Donald Trump, and you can call me, you're a socialist, these conservatives, they'll probably be in an uproar to defend their precious president, but you just have to look at his record, and it's atrocious. And don't we deserve better from our Government are elected officials. Now, I'm not saying that, you elect Bernie Sanders or you elect Hillary Clinton and, oh, this is gonna be different. No, this is a much more structural issue, right? I bought into Donald Trump, and so back in 2016, and I believed, like, if anybody can do it, it would be Donald Trump. I believed that. And so Donald Trump can't do it. He can't enforce the borders. He can't protect citizens from getting overwhelmed by this disease. He can't save working class whites who are dying of opioids. Either he can't or he won't. It doesn't matter which. But, and so I still stand by, if he can't get it done, well, then no one we elect can, to some degree. I mean, nobody within the system. And Donald Trump's essentially part of the system now. He's been co-opted into the system. Let's take a look here at Twitter here. Tucker Carlson going on a good rant about this here.
This virus, maybe we should learn something useful for the next time. Going forward, our leaders ought to be certain we have enough medicine and tests and hospital beds, at the least, in case something awful happens unexpectedly, because it will. There should be a plan to respond quickly in ways that assure the public that the people in charge know what they're doing. Those are the obvious lessons from the epidemic now in progress. But there's more to learn. Here are a few other things to think about. First, borders matter. It turns out that immigration isn't some boutique political issue that only activists need to care about. The question of who lives in your country is the most basic issue that any nation faces ever. Immediately after the coronavirus began to spread globally, sane countries started to secure their borders. They wanted to know exactly who was coming in and out, and they wanted to control it. That was the first thing they did. In Israel, where leaders care deeply about their country, border controls were swift and highly aggressive. The Israelis did not want a single person who was even potentially infected to cross into Israel, and good for them. Unfortunately, nothing like that could ever happen here in the U.S. Democrats would denounce it instantly as racist and xenophobic. So maybe Nancy Pelosi will give us a stern lecture about how immoral Israel is. We'll be waiting for that speech, probably forever. Next, gun control takes on.
So there's the clip. Oh, man. He went there. He actually went there. Yes. And let's take a look at this. Israel. This is from NPR. Israel takes strict approach to control the spread of the coronavirus. This is February 26th of this year. Now, do they get reprimanded? No. The most people will say is, well, maybe they should take a little softer of approach. But, they're just poor Jews. They're just trying to protect themselves. So here they're talking about banning, back in February, Israel banned travel from 5 foreign countries in Asia. And more recently, I understand that they've essentially shut down everything. Essentially, it's a quarantine, and if you are foreign, you essentially have to be Jewish. I don't know if they've been explicit about that, but you essentially do, because you have to know somebody who is in Israel in order to get in, and then you have to quarantine yourself. So how many non-Jews are going to be able to do that? Probably none. But yeah, Netanyahu is a serious leader in a serious country. And you could even make a good case that the United States and Israel are the same. They are governed by the same people. However, we have very different policies when it comes to borders, as you can see. You know, I know maybe for some of you who aren't up on all of this, that may sound like an extreme claim to make, but you just have to go look at AIPAC, look at when Netanyahu gives a speech to Congress and people are applauding as if it's Stalin, and they will be killed the moment they stop applauding. So, yeah, this is how serious countries handle. And we're not a serious country. I hope that is sinking in. So, I want to talk about, finally, the last thing here, the possibility of this being a bioweapon. Now, there's a good article that I would also recommend at UNS called Bats, Gene Editing and Bioweapons. Recent DARPA experiments raise concerns amid coronavirus outbreak. Now, this has been floated for a while, like the possibility of this virus having been created in a lab. And a lot of people who buy into this believe that it was created in China, in Wuhan. Sounds logical, right? But the Chinese don't agree. There's been several, reports. Here's one from Global Research. So there's been news in China disputing this, right? They've said, well, the first thing they've said, I've seen reports of, China is taking measures to make sure that their security, their lab security, is tightened in the future. Okay. Now, this doesn't necessarily imply they didn't do it, but it does lend credence to the fact that, maybe there's a link here. Maybe coronavirus was, a bioweapon, and maybe they know something. So, and there's also reports of them pointing to the U.S., and there are people who say, actually, the most likely place that this originated, because there are different strands or mutations of the virus, and apparently, according to this article, the strands that are found in Italy and Iran don't match up with the ones found in China. If they look at the genome sequencing for these viruses, they find differences. However, the one place where they do have this diversity of all of these different, if you can imagine a tree, right, and there's different branches, that's what they're arguing. They're arguing that China has a branch, Italy has a branch, Iran has a branch, and so on. And some of these bear resemblance to SARS and MERS and Zika and so on. But they are arguing that the one place is the United States, specifically our biggest biolab, which is Fort Detrick, which is the U.S. Army's. We have all of these organizations, right? It's really crazy, just the kind of research that is going on, and so, yeah, the U.S. Army research lab research organization that looks at infectious diseases. So apparently, these people suspect that it came from the United States, and this UNS article is really getting into that possibility, because there are a lot of fishy connections. we were told that this was about bats, right? And to some degree, it is about bats, but it's not the wet market, right? So what seems possible here is that the United States government, through this DARPA program, they started researching back in 2018 different forms of the coronavirus. Theoretically, when they are asked about this, they will always say, "Oh, it's just research that's intended for defensive purposes. We're just trying to, we would never use this in an offensive way, or blah, blah, blah." And we'll get into some of the history of the United States and germ warfare. But here we go. So, what seems possible, according to the Sun's article, is that there are these DARPA programs. Here they talk about the Preempt program, preventing emerging pathogen threats. And they've been researching specifically bats, the novel coronavirus strains found in bats. And they've even admitted that there are biosafety and biosecurity sensitivities that could arise because of the nature of this research. So, this U.S. Army research in Maryland, it was actually shut down due to these safety concerns. And then for some reason, I believe it was last year, they reopened this. There's also these links, because the government, they're in a position where they can't get away with doing this kind of research just out in the open. So they hide behind corporations, they hide behind universities, and they fund them. They fund all these universities in 25 different countries, okay? And they study all of these diseases. And the reason they can't do that is because the United Nations put in place back in 1975, they put in place this, there's another article, Counterpoint, talking about the Biological Weapons Convention, which arose from the United Nations in 1975, right? So in order to get away with this, they just circumvent it by looking at or by funding corporations and universities and so on. And so there's a link between Duke University and Wuhan. And Duke, according to this article, has some kind of connection with DARPA. So they've got these. The Pentagon, they're funding these studies on different diseases of the coronavirus. Now, what is the chance that somebody took either they maliciously, intentionally did it, or it just escaped from the lab? We still don't know at this point for certain, but it seems likely that it could have escaped from this lab near Wuhan and gotten into or been placed into these wet markets where they have bats. Now, if that was the case, it does seem like a setup, right? Okay, we've got this virus that is linked to bats that we've created. Now let's go release it in the wet markets and blame it all on China. So oddly enough, remember how we were talking about the media, decrying this racism and xenophobia against Chinese Americans? Well, maybe they're right, but not for the right reasons, maybe China's innocent in all this. It's a very stark possibility. Maybe it was our own government that did this. And based on the history of things that our government has done, I would not be surprised if our government didn't, at the very least, fund this virus and try to get it out there. Okay. This Counterpunch article, they're talking about, the ways that our government circumvents this. And there are these illegal facilities in the United States which are studying biological weapons. I don't know what else to call them. They're now they will always say they're doing it for defensive purposes. For instance, this one 4-year project that started back in 2017. So get ready for that. It's coming. They're going to be probably releasing this soon. It's called Insect Allies, and it's part of the horizontal, what do they call it here? I can't find the name, but horizontal environmental genetic alteration agent. Essentially, they're using CRISPR and genetic modification of genes of these pathogens and injecting them into insects, which will then spread them to crops. And supposedly, this is supposed to help protect U.S. agriculture. I'm not even sure how. But, some of the people who are involved with this, there are authors who wrote an article in Science magazine kind of whistleblowing on this whole thing. And they're saying, that the DARPA program, they're not even asking the right questions when it comes to this stuff for someone you would expect. Like, they're not even asking, how is this going to only be applied to these crops? How, with insects, how do you know it's going to get to the whole crop? It would make a whole lot more sense to spray the crops, right? But no, they're not doing that. They're looking at spreading it through insects, which is eerily similar to things that the U.S. government is known to have done in the Korean War, infecting insects and letting those spread. Some people think that ticks have been experimented on, and that we've used that in the past. So there's a long history of the United States government where we either have evidence or strong suspicions that they are engaging in this stuff, despite all of these, UN regulations. They're still experimenting in it. Now, why would this be? How does this even make sense? That is it just the people in our government? Yeah. Well, unless you understand the Jewish question, none of this is going to make sense, right? And the United States isn't the only one. Israel has also a history of looking into research of biological weapons. So back in the 90s, there was news that Israelis were developing some kind of, or trying to develop some kind of an ethno-bomb, something that would only affect Arabs. Which seems really hard to do because aren't they all supposed to be Semitic peoples? But they really wanted to create these biohazards that could be used on Arabs, and because of the genetic mutations, they wouldn't affect Jews. Now, we know the relationship, as I've pointed out before, between Jews, between Israel and the United States. I mean, is it so far-fetched to believe that this could have been some kind of coordinated attack on the globe? And sure enough, on cue, we have another news article here that says, Israeli scientists in a few weeks will have the coronavirus vaccine. Wow. Isn't that amazing, folks? Isn't that amazing? What's really remarkable, I just want you to see this here. Let's call it pure luck. This is, who is this? Dr. Chen Katz, so the director of this biotechnology group. Our basic concept was to develop the technology, not specifically a vaccine for this kind. So apparently they've been working on this for like 4 years or something. 4 years. What was happening 4 years ago? Oh, yeah, the U.S. election. Interesting. Maybe this was a backup plan. Maybe they didn't want to see Trump reelected. I don't know why. He's giving Israel everything they want, but it's not in their control. Let's put it that way. So, supposedly, in a matter of months or weeks, Israel could have a vaccine. Oh, they've saved the day. They've saved the day, folks. It's just astounding. He says, let's call it pure luck. We decided to choose coronavirus as a model for our system, just as a proof of concept for our technology. Right. It just so happens. Man, we got really lucky here. I will tell you one thing. Let me go on full screen here. I will tell you one thing. I'm not going to be taking that vaccine. I don't care how bad this virus is. I'll take my chances with the virus, and I am definitely not taking any vaccine, and I encourage you and all of those you care about to urge them into the same, because all of these like Israel tech companies, they're all linked to the U.S. government. We know that they get $3.8 billion in financial aid, military aid. So you can't just separate the U.S. and the Israel government. They're so interlinked, and we know why. Now, there's this thing about well poisoning, right? Because inevitably, when some kind of disease happens, right, you see some kvetching. You see some kvetching because some people start to say, hey, all of this stuff is seemed to be centered around these Jewish communities. With the coronavirus outbreak, there's in Westmoreland County in New York, there's a huge Jewish population. Now, partly that could be because Jews tend to live in the diverse areas, and so that's where they come into, right? But you see people pointing fingers, right? And you see Jews kvetching about it. They say, this is completely racist. This is completely anti-Semitic. And there's a long history of people blaming Jews for the spread of diseases. You can go back to the Black Death, where people talked about, this is where the meme of well poisoning comes from, I believe, is the Black Death. And people accused Jews of putting poison in the well. And, why was this? Well, it's because Jewish families seemingly weren't affected by a lot of these diseases. And so in itself, that's not proof. If somebody has more proof on this, I'd love to hear about it. But, I don't have any proof for this historical data, but it keeps happening over and over and over again. People keep blaming Jews, and it's important to ask why. Why do people keep blaming Jews? And when you listen to Jews, they never have an answer for why. They just call people names. And so, the answer to why people are angry at you and why people have been angry at you for centuries and millennia, time and time again, and why this keeps happening over and over and over and over, well, the answer is anti-Semitism. No, that's not an answer. You're basically just saying you are rational and everybody else is irrational who disagrees with you throughout all of history. How arrogant of a position is that? It'd be one thing if they were out there saying, well, no, this is wrong. This is wrong. We didn't poison these wells. Here's why. Here's the answer why. But I never hear that. I never hear any kind of defense, because that opens the gates to debate, and they don't want to have to debate this. They just want to call people down about it. So, is the coronavirus an example of 21st century well poisoning on a massive, massive global scale, when Jews are probably the most powerful they've ever been, and also when they are starting to feel scared because of the Trump election, because of Charlottesville, because of rising sentiment in Europe? People are, there's so-called anti-Semitism rising, or counter-Semitism. It's people understanding a lot of these things and talking about these things, and that scares them to death. That's why they want to censor everybody. That's why they want to shut down free speech. And they know what's coming. They see the blowback that's coming, and so they're willing to do anything to stop it, including, apparently, possibly, spreading a disease that wipes out 4% of the globe? And specifically targets older people, where white populations aren't having kids, and so you wipe out a lot of older people. This boomer removal, as they call it, which is a terrible name. Well, you're going to see different results in the election. And things are going to start coming to a head even faster. And all this could be prevented if our governments were willing to take action. If our governments were willing to, if they cared about us. But not only do they not care about us, not only do they care about their stock portfolios much more than us, the elites, that is, but I think I would not put it past them. I would not put it past them to release a bioweapon because they realize something that most people don't, which only they and the dissidents, only the elites and the dissidents realize this, which is there's a war happening right now. And so biological warfare weapons, people might be wondering, well, why would the government even be researching this, right? and especially using it on their own populations. Okay, maybe they're researching it so that in the future, sometime, if there's another war, they have one more weapon in their arsenal. No, the war is here. And that's what my channel and a lot of other people, we're trying to wake people up. It's all around you. The war is around you. The collapse is around you. It's not something that's in the future. So these global pandemics, maybe with any luck, they can be a wake-up call to people to realize that we're fighting for our lives here and our children. And I hope that people see the bigger picture and not get caught up in just the panic of toilet paper buying. So thank you for your time listening. Please subscribe and share my videos. Of course, I have ways for you to support you, which are linked below. And much of that is always appreciated, especially in these hard times. You know, I will tell you this. I give a lot more to the movement, just even in terms of financial giving, than I receive. And so I can assure you that whatever you give me monetary support, it's not gonna just go towards new toys or something useless, right? I'm in this. I'm a diehard, so to speak. So, oh God, that could be taken out of context. Never mind. I don't care about this at all. So, yes, but I do appreciate everyone's support, and I want to make more videos like this and so on, talking about news items and going through articles. So stay safe, everyone. My family and I, we're doing our best to practice social distancing, and we've got all our preparations in place, and I hope that you and your loved ones will be able to do the same and to ride out these challenging times. Thank you so much for listening.